When I was growing up, I watched a Nickelodeon cartoon known as SpongeBob, and so did all my friends. I have vivid memories of running down to my basement after school to flick on my CRT television and catch an episode. Needless to say, the show was really entertaining and had me hooked from the start, but I still watched other stuff like Scooby-Doo, Pokemon, and even Zaboomafoo, so I wasn't only watching SpongeBob. Then, after a few years, I sort of outgrew the show and began watching channels like Teletoon, which didn't even offer it, and that was the end of my experience with the show. Yet, as I went through elementary and high school, kids would always talk about how SpongeBob was the reason for giving people ADHD and making them dumb. And to be honest, I totally believed it. Since the show was so fast-paced and hyper, it kind of made sense. But that begs the question, does SpongeBob actually make you dumb? Upon Googling this question, the first two answers heavily imply that the show does in fact lower a kid's attention span, and in turn makes them score lower on IQ tests. But is this conclusive? Well, the vice president of Nickelodeon is saying it's not, and gave quite a few reasons while addressing the most popular study done by the University of Virginia, in which a group of 60 kids were tested by psychologists immediately after they had watched 9 whole minutes of the popular show known as SpongeBob SquarePants. The vice president discusses the small sample size and how the results were based on hasty generalizations. Another issue brought up was the show being deemed as educational programming, which is not the case. I believe the vice president's quote sums this up best when she says, "I couldn't understand the logic of including a program like SpongeBob, which is expressively designed to entertain a 6 to 11-year-old, and have that program be compared to a slower-paced educational program for preschoolers. SpongeBob is not designed to educate preschoolers, it's designed to entertain kids." This quote to me was interesting, as it does raise a good point, which is that a lot of adults don't understand that SpongeBob is not intended to raise their kids' IQ, it's simply to entertain them. The vice president's overall response was good, because it's precise and it addresses everything in the Virginia study, but this still wasn't enough for me. So I kept digging, and after reading more into the University of Virginia study, it became clear that the results were primarily looking at attention spans. So to state that SpongeBob negatively hurts your kid's IQ is just not true, but I can see why this assumption is formed, because kids who have an inability to focus don't retain much information, and well, that's going to correlate with their lower IQ scores in the long term. But the university conducted tests right after the kids had watched the show, so that really creates a bigger question, which is how long are these kids being affected for? Instead of testing them right after they watch the show, how about an hour later? Chances are the results would be a lot different. Another issue with the study that was brought up on forums was the chosen episode. Users were discussing how certain episodes held more of a storyline, while others made you piece them together, which is actually pretty important in this kind of thing, because a SpongeBob episode that requires a child to piece together what's going on is certainly more beneficial to them. Along with that, the other issue is if the 9-minute clip played to the children was actually the entire episode from start to finish, because it's quite easy to distract a kid if you give them 3/4 of a storyline and then just abruptly end it. The kids are going to continue thinking about the show even while performing the tests. For example, if you're watching an episode of Law & Order and somebody randomly cuts it off after 10 minutes before the show ends, your brain is going to be fixated on wondering how the show ended. So the same thing could be said for the kids in this study. So put simply, shows like SpongeBob do not lower your IQ, and there isn't nearly enough evidence to ever suggest such a result. I think this quote by a user from the forum I was researching sums it up best. I do not think that one should dismiss SpongeBob as a stupid television show. I think it's all about perspective. There are many things that kids can take away from SpongeBob that are positive. I feel like this is a psychological issue, and my biggest annoyance with psychology is that every individual is so unique. Also, even if things are silly, sometimes that is exactly what our minds need." End quote. And with that said, that's the end of my video. Please feel free to like and subscribe since it does mean a lot, and as always, I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.